Hello, everybody. I'm very excited today to welcome the famous Jason Swenk to the show. I feel really blessed to have an opportunity to chat with you and kind of pick your brain for the next half hour or so. Welcome, Jason. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about your agency playbook framework. But before we get into that, I'm really curious. What would you say that with all of the years of experience that you have, your superpower these days is?
Consistency. I mean, it's just too many people give up and they just keep trying new things over and over again. And we're just consistent.
I love that because it's not necessarily, like shiny or fancy, but boy, is that real. I think it's so easy to get caught up in kind of all these new things. I'm going to dig into what are the sorts of things that you're consistent on in a moment. But before we get there, why does the world need what you do?
Well, the world doesn't need what I do. It's only a select few. And I think everybody tries to go after the world and I ran an agency for 12 years for the first time. And I realized a couple of years after I sold that agency that I wish there was a resource that would show me the systems and the process and the strategies that worked that I could build upon. And so, that's why I've been serving agency owners for the past 7 years. Holy cow, I can't believe it's been 7 years. So the time flies by.
Well, I relate to this really hard because I'm a big systems person. And although I'm way newer at this, I've definitely found that being able to leverage other people's kind of systems and have made it just so much easier for me. They've literally shaved years and years off of my experience. And I love kind of being able to pay that forward. So I very much love how you've broken down all of the pieces of basically growing your agency from nothing to strong, profitable, stable. And you've done it in a way that really breaks it down systematically into a series of systems that are adaptable, right? No matter what that particular agency offers. And I have some questions about the specifics, but before we dig into it, can you just name for us briefly kind of what those 8 systems are?
Yeah, so it's clarity, positioning, offering, prospecting, and it's important to go in this order: delivery, operations, and leadership. And it's really 8 systems. And what I found, a number of different people would try to jump around, and it's kind of like a phone number, right? Like I could give you all the digits, I can give you the 8 digits, but if you get them out of order, you're not going to reach that destination or that person. And that's kind of how I view those systems. And some of the systems are not fun, and some people don't want to start off with them, but they're required.
That was actually one of the questions that I had is, do you go where maybe you're weakest or need the most work, or do you go in order? And I'm hearing loud and clear that you go in order. So I'm hearing from that each one kind of builds on the one before. Is that?
Exactly. Yeah. You have to build the right foundation. It's like building a house on the side of a mountain, right? You could build a house just at prospecting and just getting a bunch of business in, or doing good marketing and then selling really well. But I've seen agencies like that and they've crumbled because they haven't had the right infrastructure. They don't know where they're going. They don't have the right team around them, that they can't get their clients results. And then their client retention rate stinks and they're always constantly burning and turning. And, it kind of goes back to, most of us are accidental agency owners. I started out doing websites, making fun of one of my friends. And then people asked me to design websites for them. And I didn't really have that clarity. I didn't have that foundation set. And so for a number of different years, I struggled with, really getting to my next level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I actually was very resistant to the idea of kind of going on my own and starting my own business, my own agency at first. And the piece of advice that I got from a mentor of mine was actually kind of what you're saying, but rearranged. They were like, most people fall into it. If you can take the time and actually build it systematically, then, you may not suffer in the ways that you are afraid that you will. And of course, that let me go in very optimistically. That was not to say that it's been easy, but The thing that has really stood out for me is that clarity has been a critical piece. But as I talk to other people about it, I have come to realize that a lot of different people have a lot of different opinions about what they're getting clarity on. So I'd love if you could kind of break down, like, what does someone need to start by getting clarity on? How did they get there?
Yeah, well, it takes time, right? So think about it as, let's talk about who you're going to go after. And a lot of times when you start off, you have no idea. You're just like, whoever has money, whoever's going to pay me, stupid, right? And
Yep, hear
I
that all
kind
the
of look
time.
at it as like a Vegas buffet. It's kind of like you're going to go down the aisle, you're going to try these crab legs and the lobster and the steak and the fish and that green stuff, orange stuff. And it's through a process of elimination over time that you figure out what you don't like. And it's easy
Mm,
starting out that way of going, I don't like clients in this particular vertical, or I don't like clients that have never worked with a marketing agency in the past, or have never done marketing, or I don't like startups. And then from that, you're able to define a better picture of who you can actually serve, who you can actually get results for, who you understand, who you actually have passion for. And then
mm,
you have to figure out after that of going, well, where do I want to take this? What do I actually want to offer them? What do I want to help them out with? Where do I want to go? Like, and it takes time to figure out of going, do I want to build an agency that I can sell one day, or possibly have the option to sell? That's kind of like I talk about. Or do I
mhm,
want to build an incubator agency where this agency is going to be just profitable enough, but feed all these other businesses I have? Like a great example is
mm,
VanderMedia with Gary Vaynerchuk, right? That's an
yeah.
incubator agency. That agency is designed to, break even, or they don't even care if it loses money, but it's feeding all the other brands that they actually have, which is smart. Or maybe it's a lifestyle business. You have to determine where you want to go, or there could be other ones out there, but those are the three most common. And once you figure that out, and then you have to figure out, well, why am I doing this? Like many years
Mm,
ago, as I got into this business by accident, right? So I had old competitors after I sold the agency go, hey, how'd you work with Lotus? How'd you have this big team? How'd you sell all this? And I was like, man, and I go over kind of when you ask me, like, why should people care, or why do you exist? It's to be a resource I wish I had. And
yeah.
I remember my team was developing a blog post of a couple events that agency owners should go to. And they listed two that I couldn't stand, the organizers. I was like, get rid of them, exit them out. And my team was able to call me on my bullshit of going, is it good for agencies? I said, yes, because I had the vision of going, I want to be the number one resource in the world for agency owners of a select criteria.
Yeah.
I want to be a resource I wish I had. And
Mm.
so they understood that, and they were able to call me on my stuff when I was making it personal.
Okay. So let me see if I'm kind of pulling. There's kind of three key things here that I heard that I think are really valuable that I want to make sure I'm understanding. One is that I noticed that you said that when someone's getting clarity, they don't just necessarily sit down and write a manifesto. It takes time in the sense that you need to go out and do the thing and observe. And I'm hearing, this is me extrapolating a little bit, that this is why clarity comes before, say, positioning, is before you kind of commit to that positioning and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. You need to take the time to kind of observe, ask yourself what you like, where you're going, where you can really create results. And use that as the basis for then kind of sitting down and being like, okay, we're going to make some decisions here. I'm going to write it out. I'm going to think about what this is going to look like. And then the third thing that I'm hearing is that when you think about your why do I like doing this? What am I trying to achieve? Why am I trying to achieve this? It's not just because that can be, a valuable positioning thing, or because, that keeps your passion motivated. It's because it helps you make decisions and helps other people on your team keep you accountable to those decisions to make sure that you're still moving in the direction that you want to go. Is that,
Yeah,
correct
the
me if
why,
I'm off?
yeah, exactly. And the why is your North Star. That's what you're
Yeah.
thinking. That's what's guiding you. I worked with an agency that works with nonprofits not too long ago, and their team was kind of all over the place and they didn't have a
Mm.
North Star. And so by going through a number of different exercises and having them do like really just figure it out, he came back and was like, well, I'd love to like help these nonprofits raise $100 million in the next 5 years. I'm like, that's the North Star, man. Like now we know where we're chasing. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
I give another analogy where, let's say you're on a boat and you're from New York to going from New York to London, but you don't tell your team where you're going. And so after about 10 hours, you get tired and you go, anytime the boat changes course, come wake me up, I'll fix it. Well, the boat changes course every minute. And then you
Yeah.
wake up all frustrated. And if you just told them, hey, we're going at this degree, which is going to London, they could decide, do they want on the boat? And they could also make a course correction without you.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. We have been around for over 5 years now, but it's really just in the last year that we figured out a kind of succinct why of using the power of marketing to build strong communities. And we have some more specifics about how we do that, but just kind of that. And not only did it just resonate so strongly with our current team, but I found that when we started to bring more people on, holy cow, it was so much easier to attract, screen, onboard, integrate, introduce them to our clients, et cetera, because it was, as you said, that North Star. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. Now, kind of moving us along beyond clarity. So without forgetting that we need to go in order and not just kind of skip steps, looking at the other puzzle pieces, is there one puzzle piece that you see leaders struggling with the most?
Well, it's the clarity one is probably the most because
Oh, interesting. I'm glad I zeroed in on it.
right. Well, it's probably clarity because that's the foundation of everything. If you don't know where you're going, then how do you position? How do you hire the right people that believe in your core values? That right?
Yeah.
Like you're not hiring your identical twin. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make when they just get started or they hire their first person. They hire their twin, and that's a complete nightmare. If you know where you're going and then you know your core values, right? Like ours is always, do more, be resourceful, do more with less. Celebrate wins, share failures, right? Just learn something every day, like have fun, like I don't dress up like we, right? And if you find those people and those core values or adventurous, all that kind of stuff, everything else fixed itself. And I would always try to be the dumbest person in the room, which is not very hard, but we always think we need to find this sales system and go buy a LinkedIn course or something, whatever it is. But if you don't have the right foundation before you start, that clarity, it's not going to be as successful. It may work, but it won't work in the long term the way you want it to be.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it kind of leads me to the next question is that then as you kind of progress through the other steps, once you've taken some time with clarity, how often should someone come back to that clarity step?
I think it's every year, sometimes maybe every quarter of really making sure, especially when you're doing quarterly coaching calls with your team, right? Like we want to skip to the leadership, the last system, right? Like there's 5 roles that you should be in order to transition from an owner to a CEO. And one of them is coaching and mentor your leadership team. And so every quarter you should be coaching your team in order to move them along. And when you're doing that, you're constantly going, how do you align with our core values? How do you align with what we believe? How do you align with our North Star? And so you're constantly going, and that can change over time. That's perfectly fine. You just don't want to zigzag every quarter and that kind of stuff. So you want to kind of take time. Sometimes agency owners, I find, they'll go through the agency playbook. They'll get really energetic. They'll share it with the team, the new direction, and then it changes the next quarter. I'm like, take your time going through it. Go through this framework rather slow. Go through it fast, but then constantly keep going through that framework and understanding it.
So what I'm hearing is that it's something that you have to take your time with, but that it's also a cyclical process to some degree. Like at least, and this is just speaking from my own experience, every time we hit a new stage of growth, it feels like problems that we felt like we had solved in the past just come back with new faces and new masks because the context is different at that point.
Yeah, there was a game in college. So I graduated in the 90s. It was called Age of Empires. And
Yes, I remember that.
Okay. Oh, well, you impressed me. You know Age of Empires. And so as the game, you start off in the Stone Age. And as you progress up levels, you have to get gold, I think wood, and maybe something else. And as you get to a certain level, then you move to the next level and you restart. And that's kind of how I look at these 8 systems is every level you get up, you have to restart and reassess each of them. Some systems you'll go through faster this time, some you will go slower.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and also kind of brings together the answer. You already answered it in terms of, do you go where you need to the most, or do you go in order? What I'm hearing is that cyclical aspect allows you to go in order, but to linger longer on the places where you're feeling challenged, and perhaps consider more the relationship of how it's building on or leading up to the thing that is being built on it. Okay. Would you say that there are any... what would you say the kind of biggest missed opportunity or kind of approaching it wrong thing that you see with leaders when they're going towards that clarity step, like when they're digging into that?
I mean, I don't think there's any, maybe thinking it's always just finished. And, you're like, oh, I checked the box. I got my core values and I got our North Star, and then not living it, not breathing it, right? Not constantly looking at it. I mean, it's not just a check mark box and it's done. It's constantly going through it.
Living.
And you're never done learning. You're never done. You've never figured it all out. There's just always a constant, I always say like you're building upon it over and over again, just layer upon layer.
That's an iterative process. It's like you're approaching it again and again and improving it every time. All right, that makes a lot of sense to me. I want to zero in a little bit on the operations system, just because that's something that I hear people just bringing up a lot. In particular, hiring and structuring. So I think everyone, has kind of heard the fire fast, hire slow, and has looked at an org chart and those kinds of pieces. And yet, I just hear all the time that hiring is just people's biggest pain point, in particular, knowing kind of who to hire next, how to decide who to hire next, whether your structure is working for you. I'm wondering whether you have any just insight on that, whether you have kind of maybe a system or a framework within the system that you can share.
It really starts with self-assessing yourself. A lot of people will go, I'm really good at X, and I suck at Y. And then they spend all this time on courses for fixing Y. And I'm like, no, you should hire for Y. Like your superpower is X. So if you're really good, like let's say, for your audience, let's say they're in the freelancer model and they want to transform more into an agency level. If you're really good at sales, you should hire someone to help you with operations, or vice versa. If you're really good at operations, you can hire someone in sales. And just, constantly leverage that, and don't try to hire everyone at once.
That's a big one.
Little by little. But here's the other thing is if you're sitting down, as we're recording this is in January of 21, which a lot of people are like, I can't wait to 22 now. We're like only a couple days into January, which makes total sense. And there's lots of opportunity right now, but let's say you're sitting down now in January planning for the year, and you're going, oh, I need to bring in probably 3 or 4 people throughout the year. Well, you should look at your pricing now as they're here right now and you have to pay them. Because a lot of times your pricing is just based on you or one other person. Yeah. But if you have to bring in all these other resources, which you should, because it's not about like, for a long time, I thought about people just want to grow their agency faster, and that's not it. Yeah. They want to be able to create the freedom to pick and choose and do what they love. In order to do that, they have to have the right systems and the right people surrounding them to do the stuff that they're not that good at, or do the stuff that they're better at. So you have to look at that pricing as well. So let's say I'm really good at operations and I look for a salesperson. I would look for a salesperson that's used to not that. And here's a big mistake. A lot of people try to get an agency experience from a really big agency, thinking, wow, I will be like the big agency. So back in the day for me, I'd almost name the name, but I'm not. There was a big agency that I kind of role modeled, and I was like, oh, I would envy, which was a mistake. And I would try to take their employees thinking I'll become them. Well, those employees that were used to having, it's kind of like Office Space. If you remember, like, oh, you take the paper from here to here to here. Can't you just, like, you could eliminate all these steps.
Yeah.
Those people that come from the bigger organizations are not as resourceful. So it goes back to the core values of, I liked people scrappy. And I liked people that liked trying to figure out, fix a problem with the solution and share that with the team. And so don't think about hiring from the bigger guys. Hire and make sure you're hiring that scrappy person in sales that will figure out, I will figure out a way to figure out how to find leads and how to get conversations, and then figure out a way that I can develop a process that makes it an easy decision for them and also reduces the length of time that it takes to close. Like, that's the type of person I would look at if I was really good at operations. And then from that, once I start getting that sales up to beat, and then I have to think about, well, I need to stop being the go-to person for client questions and constantly getting resources. So then I would be like, I need to hire an account manager or project manager to do that, because ultimately your role should be these 5: setting the vision and communicating it to your team often, being the face of the organization. And I know a lot of you may be like, well, if I'm the face, then all our clients are going to want me. No, it's all about the rules that you set up. And Gary Vaynerchuk's another great example of this. Like, people go to VaynerMedia because of him, but he's not doing your account, and you'll probably never get to talk to him.
Yeah, and nor would you expect to. And yet I know that when I was making that shift, it was just so difficult for me to wrap my mind around that. And it took my mentor saying, okay, so even if they do want to work with you, that doesn't mean that the answer is yes. You set up the boundaries, you set up the rules that, just because your child is insisting that they want to drive doesn't mean that you are going to let them drive, no matter how much they insist. Not that clients are like children, but just, it's easy to forget that we are in charge sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the next is coach and mentor your leadership team. Like, you should never have over 5 direct reports. If everybody's reporting to you, that's just overwhelming. And you built this huge wall up around you that you can't get out, which is not fun. Assist sales, right? You don't want to be that doctor that greets someone when they come into the medical clinic and go, fill out these forms and let me see your insurance card and let me take your blood pressure, let me stick you with this, and then give you a prescription, right? You lose credibility.
Yeah.
And then the last part is understand the financials, understand what are the KPIs or what's your scorecard to make sure you guys are heading in the right direction. So, if you need to pivot or what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Those resonate very strongly for me. Although I guess I have, been through the agency playbook, so no surprise there. But I think we hear a lot about people wanting to become, like that visionary or that big leader or et cetera. But once again, just like clarity, I feel like a lot of people don't understand what that actually means, what that actually looks like. And I perceive that that's a barrier to getting there. So I like how you've broken it down, because if we can see it, then we can plan for it and work towards it.
And we're not all visionaries, right? Like, we should take like those self-assessment tests to figure out, are you more of an operator? Right? Are you like, and it's really easy to determine if you're a visionary. Like, if you could get in a room with like us and we could just talk about ideas left and right and you'd be totally happy, you're a visionary, right? But if
Yeah.
that would make you upset, be like, let's just do the damn thing. Or if you're another way to tell is like, if you're constantly coming up with ideas, but it's hard to figure out like, what is it like, you're not executing on it because you can't figure that out. Like that's an operator, like visionary and operator work really well together. I interviewed Gary Vaynerchuk's president or chief operating officer. And he was like, look, I never come up with ideas. I was like, I take the ideas from Gary of what his ultimate vision are. And then I figure out how. He does the how.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how myself and my partner work as well. Actually, she's been out on maternity leave, and up here in Canada, maternity leave is a full year. And it's been really interesting to shift the dynamic where now, because as a visionary, I do have some operational leanings, but being thrust back into a lot of the operational role has shown me just how much of a privilege it is to be able to focus on those ideas and have someone else tackle the how. Although also a good experience for me because it's not utter hell, but it's definitely it has helped illustrate those differences, I think, in a really pointed way.
Wow, a whole year. Wow, that's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we are all like ultra high achievers. So the reality is that it's not like she is totally away for a year and we're not talking to her. It's more of kind of a sliding scale as time goes on. But the pandemic has certainly made it more like that year away than we anticipated. So. Yeah, but actually, because it came up, I think it's worthwhile to mention that knowing that that was coming, because of course we had notice, actually pushed us to look at and really, really clearly define our roles, push us a lot more into coaching and mentoring our leadership team, and just understanding what sorts of systems she's responsible for and what they're going to look like. So, when she does come back fully, I perceive she'll be coming back to a much, much healthier operation because we did replace, 80% of her day-to-day stuff with, I guess, like automations and different systems and processes and et cetera, which I think when she comes back will mean that she can focus a lot more on implementing the new big ideas. So that's special.
And the one thing you should think about, especially with her, because as she comes back, and there's a lot of things, and this happens when you start setting up the right systems within your agency and your role starts shifting, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that you used to do, they don't need you for. And so they can go through and you can go through a series of depression of going, the agency doesn't need me for that. And a lot of times when I'm working or consulting with agency clients and they achieve this, they become the agency CEO and they go into this meeting and they're like, oh, we're good. We're good, Zach. Or like, Zach, go away. Or Brian, go away. Right? Or we're good. And then they'll have a conversation with me and be like, I'm not needed. You're needed for a different role. You're needed for the new role. And so when your partner comes back, make sure she understands that and make sure you constantly let her know that, because it could be in a place where she comes back and she's like, I'm just not needed. And then she has resentment and that kind of stuff. And it turns in a bad, I've seen that happen. So I'm just giving you those little nuggets now.
No, thank you. And thank you for bringing that up because I didn't really realize it until you said it. But when I started to move more into the visionary role, but before I had defined what that meant, I definitely went through that and it lasted, like 4 or 6 months even. And I look back on that time and I'm like, holy cow, I could have been serving the agency so much better and enjoying myself. But I was experiencing this weird mix of like guilt, like, oh, I'm not in the weeds all the time. So therefore I'm not supporting them enough, and flip-flopping back and forth to exactly what you're saying. Oh, they don't need me. But oh, hey, it turns out that having an extra 20 hours a week to work on big ideas can be ultra valuable. And now 2 years in a row, I've come up with something, last year I developed, it was more of a streamlining of a previous service rather than a new service, but we basically switched our sales 80-20 from one-offs to recurring, just from me having the time to really sit with this idea I've had for years and figure out, okay, how does this solve problems? How does it align with us and our values? And that was just so valuable, a year later.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Some people, it blows up everything, or they start self-destructing and getting
Mm.
rid of the right people in order to get that
Ooh.
significance back. And it's just, I mean, we see that in politics. You
Oh,
guys in
yeah,
Canada are
too
like,
real.
I live in the upstairs apartment of the crack house.
uh, um, yeah, too real. But I just want to take us back a little bit to the kind of operation sales dynamic, because we moved through that, and I think that was really valuable. But one of the questions that I get there often is this kind of push and pull between, do I hire someone who basically comes up with the process and takes over the role, and do I focus on finding that kind of perfect person, versus how much legwork do I need to put in? For example, making sure that I'm bringing in a salesperson and there's a clear system around kind of the pipeline and how they close a deal. How much is it that's kind of scrappy person, and how much do you need to put in, especially if that's not your area of expertise?
Well, if it's not your area of expertise, so you got to hire for that. But it does go back to the foundational systems of, the clarity and positioning, the offering of going for the salesperson and saying, this is who we're going after, right? So a lot of people are like, I go after small business, or I go after B2B business. I'm like, that's not a target market.
No.
And they're not specific. And then they have a hard time with positioning, or they have a hard time with their offering, because it's just like, sell them something. Right? Like, there's no foundational stuff. But if you have that foundational stuff, you could go to someone and say, look, I've never hired a salesperson. I want you to come in, and I need your help with setting up systems. Is that something you can do? And they'll be like, and all salespeople in an interview will sell you better than they normally could sell.
Yeah, because that was my next question: is how do you manage your risk there if you don't know what to qualify for?
And here's what you do, and say, look, well, here's what I want. Like, here's my goal, or how I'm going to measure you on success. I want you to have $1 million quota. I'm just making that up. Whatever you want, whatever you expect and be thrilled that they would have. And say, if I had you $1 million quota and this is what I want, could you do it? And they're going to say yes. They're like, cool. How would you do it? I want to see the first what's your 120-day plan, success plan look like? And then I would shut up. And then I would want them to be like, okay, well, cool. That will take me a week to do. Let's set up another meeting this time. Or if they're like, yeah, I can do it, and then they just start making it up on the call, that's not the person.
Yeah,
right?
red flag.
Exactly. Ask you the right questions. Like, if someone just goes, yeah, I'll do it, and they just come back to you without asking questions or any of that, it's not going to be a good salesperson. So put them in a role in order to do that. And then that plan that they develop, now you get to measure them on that. So if they're like, well, my first week, I'm really going to dive into this and develop this right system. And then the second week, I'm going to look for admins in order to do the deep research I need in order for me to have successful calls. So I'm not doing a lot of the legwork. And then I'm going to bring in some VAs that can actually help me with the proposal. So I can spend all of my time, or 90% of my time, on a call with the right prospect. That's kind of how I would do it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's actually not an answer or an approach I've heard before. But what I'm hearing, just to make sure I'm breaking it down correctly, is that you're going to be real with them, number one, about where you're at. And you're going to be real with yourself that they're probably going to sell you and they're probably going to do it well on their ability. But the crux of it is the how. And some green flags that I'm hearing is them taking the time, letting you know it's going to take time for them to do it so they can basically do the research, do the prep, come with something that is fleshed out. And then that also allows you to kind of measure how different people, assumedly you're screening more than one person. So it allows you to see what their kind of leadership potential is there, which I think is especially important for sales because it's one of the most leader-driven positions because they have to be super self-motivated in many different ways. And it also allows you to assess where their priorities are around the sales position, if I'm understanding correctly, when you're talking about, are they going to bring in other people to do the legwork? Where are they wanting and needing to spend their time in order to be successful, and how much consideration have they given it?
Yep, you got it. I mean,
cool.
It's just lay out your expectations, be honest with them, honest with yourself, and and then measure them on the plan that they develop.
Mm. Yep, that makes a lot of sense and makes me think about some of the things we could have done differently when we started hiring out the role. But once again, hence framework, really solid.
The price of education.
Yes, the price of trial and error. And, in some ways, I do feel blessed for the things that we have had to struggle with as well, because a very, very strong motivation for me is similar to what you've said, Jason, is being able to turn around and be like, hey, let's pay this forward and help some people cut some time off there. Because trial and error is painful.
Yeah. And it's actually, when I look back at the stuff that when I was in the weeds of running the agency, the stuff I was like, I want to forget, this sucks, this is horrible. That's the stuff I remember because we were able to figure out a solution to overcome it. And then when I get together with my old team and some of our old leadership team, those are the things that we have laughs and chuckles over and really remember. And we've learned the most from that.
That makes sense. And a way to reframe problems and challenges. What I'm hearing is kind of almost the strength of what you've accomplished, but also some of your most vibrant memories are where you were able to take something that really freaking sucked and actually fix it and make it awesome, because that's really powerful. Makes it feel powerful. Awesome. So I'm going to turn the lens a little bit towards you personally with some questions that I always like to just hear people's perspectives on. First one is, other than caffeine, what is it that gets you up in the morning?
Oh, my family. I mean, that's number one by far, just making sure that I give them everything that they need, from attention to time to love that's really everything. So I don't care about anything else. That and health. And actually, I don't drink any caffeine. I don't do coffee or Coke or anything.
Excellent. I feel you. Well, that's actually not true. I eat chocolate,
okay,
but
I eat chocolate. Yeah, that's
chocolate. Yeah,
I eat a lot of chocolate.
All right, glad to know I'm not alone. I'm glad that you brought up health, though, because actually I feel like this is a topic that is often swept under the rug. And my next question is, what would you say the number one thing is that you do to preserve your wellness?
I try to run every day, or walk, or bike, or just hike. That's why I love being in the mountains, just getting out and just going, this world's a lot bigger than just my little problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I have something that I call big nature. I love big nature, even if it's just the sky, because it reminds me that ultimately I'm small and shit will pass.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. And are there any last words of wisdom that you would like to leave someone who's listening to this right now with?
Stop measuring yourself compared to other people or their Instagram life or whatever that is. Just be consistent, patient, and enjoy the journey. With our mastermind, we have everybody out at the house, and we climb the mountain behind the first night. And before I would have people out, me and my sons would just run up it and see how fast we can get up it. And then we had a couple members that they're not used to the elevation. It's pretty steep climb, and they're laying on the ground, they're huffing and puffing. And so I'm making sure everybody gets up there. And as I was, helping everybody get up there, I didn't realize how beautiful it was at a number of different peaks. So I didn't really ever enjoy the journey, when we were running up the mountain or running back down it, until I was able to take people with you. So I guess the point is enjoy the journey, make sure you take as many people on that journey as possible, and it would be that much more rewarding.
I think that's a beautiful analogy. And it reminds me of how other people can help us slow down and see things that maybe we miss when we are, as you said, whether literally or figuratively running on the path. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jason, before I let you go, did you want to share with the audience more? They can find out where they can find out more about you, the agency playbook, etc. online?
Yeah, definitely. Easiest way is just to go to jasonswenk.com. Swenk is spelled with an E, so SWENK. So jasonswenk.com. And then you'll see a link to the playbook there where you can actually look at, even if you don't jump into the playbook, you'll at least be able to look at the 8 systems, and then you'll be able to know what to concentrate on first, of really to figure out, because the order does matter, consistency matters, and then just build upon it. So I would highly encourage you guys to do that. And you can get there from jasonswenk.com/playbook and just request an invite. And let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm always here to help out and be that resource I wish I had.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being such an incredible resource on this show. I appreciate your willingness to just kind of share and be open and let us know what works and the truth. And even if it's not pretty, I think that that's really important, especially right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Excellent. And to everyone listening, thank you as well for tuning in. I hope that you got some value out of this. And I hope that you can have a great day today. If you're not having a great day, I hope that maybe you can step outside, maybe take a 5-minute walk, and appreciate that your world is bigger than just your office. All right. Take care, guys.